it on? I'm beating you. Gotta catch up. Alright. Take your Bibles, turn to James chapter 5. Sermon's going to go along a little bit with what Aaron went on, but I didn't know he was going to preach on eternal security. So I'm going to hit on it a little bit. But I'm going to hit a different aspect of it. I'm going to hit on some verses that they use so you can lose it. These are some rare verses they normally don't use. But they're in James chapter 5. Look there at verse 20. It says, Let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins. Up there, verse 19 before that says, Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converts the sinner. So this sinner here is talking about a brethren, a saved person. And he says, if you convert him from the error of his way, you will save his soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins. What they'll say to this passage is, there it says, save his soul from death, talking about his soul going to hell. But we know that once you are saved, your soul never will die. Jesus says, he that liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Right. So this soul here isn't talking about like your actual soul. It's talking about just a physical death. You say, no, it says a soul. So every time in the Bible it says soul, it has to be referring to your eternal being. Well, that's not so. Turn over to Leviticus 17. We'll see, soul does not always mean the spiritual, eternal being, whatever you want to call it. It can refer to the flesh. Leviticus 17, look there, verse 11, it says, For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that maketh the atonement for the soul. So, somebody should show this to John MacArthur, since he doesn't believe it. Verse 12, it says, Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, No soul of you shall eat blood. So no soul of you shall eat blood. So does the soul eat blood? No, it's talking about you, your flesh, eating the blood. So we see here, the soul does not always mean your eternal being wherever you go when you die. But that's what they try to say about James 5 is that, if you convert a saved person out of the error of his way, you're going to save him from hell because he's going the direction of hell. And because it says save a soul from death. But that's just talking about physical death. You can look in 1 Corinthians 5. It talks about, the destruction of the flesh. You can look 1 John 5 talks about the sin unto death. But like I said, that's what James 5 is talking about. It's talking about the sin unto death. Another place is Revelation chapter 3. So like I said, a lot of these verses that they use, you just got to take a step back, look at it, don't panic like I used to. I'd get all in a crying, bawling, squalling fit and not know what in the world to do. The Bible got contradictions But Revelation chapter 3, look there at verse 5, it says, He that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot out his name out of the book of life, but confess his name before my fathers and before my angels. I don't know if any of you heard me. I think I showed Chris this clip. There's this old man out there. His name is David Pawson or whatever. And this is a verse he used. A guy told me, he said, once your name is in the book of life, God's never going to blot that name out. He said, well, yeah, it is. It says, he that overcometh, I will not blot his name out in the book of life. Here's the thing, these people don't understand salvation because they don't even know what it means to overcome. Yep. You can also look over in Revelation chapter 2, verse 11. This is a verse for Doka. It says, He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. Amen. So we see that phrase, he that overcometh. He that overcometh, Jesus says, he that overcometh shall I give unto him to, there's all kinds of promises to those that overcome. So what's it talking about? My flesh overcoming sin? Or what's it talking about? Well, go to 1 John chapter 5. We'll see. 1 John chapter 5. We'll see what an overcomer is. 1 John chapter 5. Paul says, whosoever believeth and turns from his sins, goes to All Scripture Baptist Church and gives 20%. Or, no, I read that into there. It says, whosoever believeth that Jesus is the Christ is born of God. Everyone that loveth him that begot loveth him also that begotten of him. So who is the man that's born of God? Whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ. That's who someone that's born of God is. Verse 4 says, for whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Who is he that overcometh the world, but he that believeth that Jesus is the Son of God? So John makes the point that if we believe, we overcome. That's who an overcome is. Someone who has believed on Jesus Christ. They've overcame death. They've overcame, the devil. They've overcome many things. They overcome the world. And, you can show this to people and they'll say, well, that's one way you overcome. But if you don't want to overcome sin in your life, you got to physically battle sin or else you're not going to make it. Well, verse 5, John makes this point. He asks this question. He says, who is he that overcometh the world, but he that believeth that Jesus is the Son of God? So he's saying the only way you can overcome this world is if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God. That's the only overcomer. In Romans, it says we are more than conquerors, through him that loved us. So go over next place, Romans chapter 8. Actually, like I was telling Aaron, Corey read this verse while he was preaching. I'm not gonna cry over it, but I had those exact same notes on the toilet. I had those exact same notes. Romans chapter 8. You can turn there. All right. Verse 12, he says, therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live after the flesh. For if ye live after the flesh, now this is talking about the sin unto death, ye shall die. But if you live through the Spirit, do mortify the deeds of the flesh, ye shall live. They say, see, you're going to die spiritually if you live after the flesh. Like I said, that's not talking about death as in the second death. Because I don't ever have to fear hell. Amen. Death on me again. I've overcame that. Amen. Paul says I'm an overcomer. John 11, 25, 26, Jesus says you shall never die. So why am I worrying about death? Why are we talking about spiritual death? Right. If Jesus already said it's never going to happen. Because they don't believe the promise of God. That's right. That's why they can't understand the verse. The verse is talking about physical death. Like I said, it's not spiritual death, but physical. And he's saying, look, if you go out and you party every night, you do smoke, you do drink, you do all these things, eventually you're going to die. So turn over to Hebrews 3. Hebrews chapter 3. Here's another verse they use. For all have sinned. Alright, Hebrews 3. Look at there, verse 14. For we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast in it. Now this is one they use. They love to use Hebrews. Now look at this verse. He says, for we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our what? What's that word? Confidence steadfast unto the end. So they try to say partaker is kind of like a child of God. They say it's the same thing, which it's not. Partaker of Christ has to do with the reward. And he says, look, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. So what does the confidence have to do? Does that have anything to do with salvation? No. Look over at chapter 10, verse 35. So what's he talking about? Partaker if we hold fast our confidence. Verse 35, he says, cast not therefore your what? Confidence. Don't cast that away. Why? So you can be saved? No, he says, which have great recompense of reward. And that's what that has to do with this reward. So these verses that they used, these verses that they point out, what do they prove? Or what are they actually saying? One, they either prove what we say. You can't lose it. You won't be blotted out. You won't be hurt of the second death. Two, it has to do with physical death. And three, we see reward. That's what these verses have to do with. Now go over to chapter 9. And actually Hebrews, I think, is one of the best books on eternal security. So it's funny that they love to use it. They go to chapter 3, they go to chapter 6, chapter 10. But honestly, I think it's one of the best books on eternal security. Look there, verse 12. He says, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. So we are redeemed for how long? Eternally. Right. You know, go over to, let's see. Yeah, chapter 10 again. Sorry. 10, look there, verse 10. By which we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. Verse 14. For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. So how long am I perfected for? Forever. And like I said, if I'm perfect spiritually, because I have Jesus' righteousness on me, I can't go to hell because I'm already perfect. And this isn't going to go to heaven because it's not perfect. But the inward man is, because it's born of God, and God can't sin. All right, let's close with prayer. Dear God, thank you for these verses, Lord, and they actually prove eternal security. They're great verses. I pray that if anybody comes along to the people in this church, that this sermon has helped them and they know what to say these verses. Love you. Thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.